Hello, I'm Richard Vobes, the Bald Explorer, out on another exploration. And today I'm in Didling in West Sussex, down here in the rural South Downs, at the very edge of the north of the South Downs, in fact. And I'm here to have a look at Didling Church. And with me to help explore is Andrew Shaxson. Hello, Andrew.
Richard, hello.
It's lovely to meet you. You've agreed to take me around this wonderful rural church, which I believe is from the 13th century, and had a lot of changes, a lot of interesting stories. Mm-hmm. And so could you just tell us more or less where Didling is and a little bit of its history?
Well, Didling is at the foot of the South Downs between Petersfield and Midhurst.
Right.
And it's one of the springline villages which run, well, basically we're 2 parishes away from the Hampshire border. So I hope that locates its place in West Sussex.
Yes. I mean, it's very idyllic, isn't it? I mean, you come down here to the church, and if you're a town person like me, it seems incredibly remote.
Well, in fact, the population of Didling has collapsed over the last 150 years. 150 years ago, well over 100 people lived in Didling. Now there are only about 12 people on the electoral register.
Gosh.
So there were houses years ago where now they're just open fields.
Yes.
And it is very quiet here indeed. But the church survives, of course. But the story of its survival is really quite remarkable because it's not been without accident and incident, as you will hear as we go round.
Well, let's go and have a look. Now, it's known as the Shepherd's Church, isn't it?
It is. Where that name came from is lost in the midst of time, but there's no denying that it's surrounded by sheep and it's surrounded by sheep land. In fact, the noise you might have heard in the background earlier when I was talking was the shepherd doing some maintenance work to a fence.
Yes, and if I just turn the camera around this way, you'll see the close proximity between the church here and, of course, the northern slopes of the South Downs, and all this wonderful open country, which no doubt is pretty much peppered by sheep.
Well, there are quite a
main
number of sheep around here. The dairy herds are all gone. There used to be dairy herds in every village, indeed in several dairy herds in most parishes, but there are very few around here now. Indeed, there was a big dairy herd on the farm which is near here.
Oh, I see.
And indeed the one which is now the sheep farm.
So dairy and sheep then, not so much.
Oh yes, they were mixed agriculture around here.
Right.
Even things like sugar beet were grown around
here.
Oh
really? Oh, okay.
What that's got to do with St Andrews at Didling, I'm not quite sure.
No, so we should say it is called St Andrews. It's dedicated to St Andrews. Mm-hmm. And we're looking at the west end, the west wall, which is brick.
It is, yes. Both the west and the east wall had to be rebuilt in the 1870s when this church was reopened after 24 years of closure.
Right.
It was closed because this was one of 3 churches. The church here at Didling and the 2 churches to the west in the parishes to the west of here at Treyford and Elstead were both closed when a big new early Victorian church was built to replace all 3 of them. And the history of that Victorian church is even more dire than the history of these 3 churches because it was literally blown up in 1951.
Anyway, that's not at St Andrews, is
no.
it? Now, I know you showed me earlier. I want to have another look at this. It's not terribly interesting to look at, but it does sound like it's an important, or it could be an important feature of the church. On a separate photo, I'll show you this, but what is it that we're standing above?
Well, it's thought to be, and an antiquarian looked at this in the early 1920s and said, goodness, if it's what I think it is, it's a Templar's stone, a Knights Templar's gravestone, and it shouldn't be left lying around in the churchyard where it will deteriorate. Well, here we are nearly 100 years on, and it's still lying around in the churchyard. I have mentioned it to various people, and they say we've got priorities which are greater than this when it comes to looking after the church and the churchyard.
I suppose it's coming to no harm here, other than, as you said, maybe the lawnmowers chipping over it.
Well, yes, the rabbits appear to enjoy using it for reasons that rabbits use things.
Yes. It's a church that is still well attended at St Nicholas. I mean, you were telling me at Christmas time it's packed out.
There are services here very infrequently. There's only one set service a month.
Oh, right.
But because there are 3 other parish churches in the parish, because the parish is now combined with Harting, which is a much bigger parish to the west of here.
Yes.
And obviously Harting and the rebuilt church at Elstead, which was one of the ones which was closed that I've previously referred to when the big new church was built, that also has services. So the vicar has to share his time with all 3 churches.
All 3, yes. It seems to be the case these days. But, I mean, looking at it, it looks in incredible condition as we come back here to get a nice view, passing this maple. Is this some field maple?
Yes,
Some
it is.
description?
Yes,
It looks like it's in great condition, and you probably imagine that it's in the best condition it's ever been these days.
Well, it's quite likely, because certainly one finds bits of information about the condition of the churches of this church and others which have been written down over the years, and people say we have a problem with it.
Yes.
And Bishop's Bower's visitation of churches in this area, that found lots and lots of problems with many of the churches. And as you can see from this view, the brickwork at the west end is also visible towards the east end, and that was rebuilt at that time too.
Right.
And so what you're looking at there is Victorian work.
And so many churches have, I mean, that's what makes, for me, fascination for church buildings, because you've got different periods of history all throughout, and you can go and play detective and look at those different bits. You haven't got a church that's just kept in aspic. But you can see some of the original is that presumably the original stones at the end, the
took
windows?
out the original windows.
Yes.
Yes, those windows are the originals and were replaced when they rebuilt the wall.
And as you come into the churchyard, we do like our trees on the Bald Explorer. We have this rather superb yew tree. Every churchyard, of course, has its yew tree, and this is of some significant age. I don't suppose you know roughly. No idea.
No, but it's centuries old.
It's centuries old. But there is an interesting story about it, I believe.
Well, Richard, I don't know if you can see the cut that's been made in it, which of course was the start of the forester's cut when he came to chop it down, misunderstanding an instruction to remove a branch which was going out of it towards the church and was obviously therefore threatening the roof of the church.
Yes.
He came along to make a start on cutting the tree down. And what you see is the start of the incision he made.
So instead of the branch, he was going to remove the whole tree.
The whole tree, yes.
Gosh.
But fortunately for us, and more fortunately for the tree, he was spotted doing it by a farm worker who reported him to the farmer who lives in the farmhouse to the north of where we're standing now, who came rushing down here and said, "What on earth are you doing?"
Yes.
To which he said, "I'm following instructions." He said, "You misunderstood them." The tree was saved, and here we have it still for posterity.
And actually, when you look at the cut, you can see they must have been labouring for some time, hacking into that yew, because it's not. I wouldn't think back then, with the tools they were using, an easy task to remove a huge tree like this.
No, well, fortunately, they didn't have a chainsaw, else they might have had had it down quite quickly.
But it's a lovely tree, and definitely worth looking for. Going to climb under here, and shall we go, Andrew, and have a look on the inside?
Why not?
We're going to enter through a very modest porch here, but made of wood, coming through, and just wipe my feet because we are out here in the muddy Southdowns, and we're inside. It's a very humble church, isn't it? But very clean and incredibly well looked after.
Well, it is very well loved, and it's not just well loved by the parishioners. There is a visitor's book behind where I'm standing, and if you look at the comments in the visitors book, and they're not just the comments of today and yesterday, but the comments in the visitors books over many decades, they have been, this is my favourite church. I come back here time and time again.
And the distance that people have come from, which is interesting, as I peruse, Ontario and Australia and different places like that.
Well, you'll find that a lot of these people who come from abroad are people who've come here because their families lived here, years and years ago, and possibly they emigrated to Australia, and they've come back to see the church, the village
still here,
that their families were interested in. And one of the more interesting, indeed, in his own way, the most well-known visitor was the then president of Chile, who came back here, who was a man called Patricio Aylwin. And the Aylwin family, they lived in Didling, and they lived in Treyford. Indeed, the next village to the west of here is Treyford. They lived in the manor house, the big house there, owned the land around it. And the cadet branches of the family were farming here throughout the 18th century, throughout the 19th century.
Now, let's continue our observations, because you've got some curious pews here of varying ages.
Oh yes, what you're looking at is I believe it's Jacobean.
Oh right, okay.
The fundamentally it's Jacobean, but they are beefed up and strengthened by much more modern work. The backs and indeed part of the seats. I think if you sat on the bit which is underneath the plank which is on top of that one, you'd feel it was most uncomfortable, but even little modern extensions to ensure that come Christmas, when this place is packed, there's room for more people to sit in here.
And they look like oak. Is it oak?
Oh, it's oak.
Yes,
it's old oak.
It's beautiful.
And likewise, Jacobean. The Jacobean. The rails.
The rails
are Jacobean, as is the pulpit, but that is made out of a chest.
An old travelling chest.
Well, no, thought to be one of the chest, the church chest.
An old church chest. Oh, yeah. Yes. And it's incredibly ornate.
It is, yes.
Beautiful carving.
Mm-hmm.
It's a beautiful rural church, and I would certainly recommend anybody come and have a look. I guess must get a lot of walkers coming along.
Yes, there are. The South Downs Way goes along the top of the ridge above the church, but there's a footpath running directly past it, and people are told about this church. People you talk to, people who put comments in the visitors book, are obviously aware of this church before they come here. Richard, could I just point out the font to you, if only because this church has very few, how shall I say, features that would normally be a great big rose window or something similar, but this font is extremely interesting in so much as it could be older than the church itself. It could even be a Saxon font. It's as you can see, it is a tub font. It is a very simple carved out piece of stone. Bracklesham bed. The Bracklesham beds are south of the Downs, and it is thought to be possibly the oldest in the county.
Gosh.
And possibly one of the oldest in the country.
Wow.
Which
it's very simple in design, of course, which I guess is a tribute to its age.
It is.
And finally, just now that the sun has come out, let's just take in this vast view. This is what's really nice here. There is no built-up towns that spoils the view. You've got the immediate farm in front of us, and just this incredibly wide vista. It's been an absolute joy, Andrew, for taking me around your wonderful rural church and giving us a little bit of history about that. I definitely recommend people come, if you're in this way, come to Didling and have a little gander. And don't forget to put your name in the visitors book. Thank you so much. It's been a joy.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it too, Richard.
Good. Oh, well, that's even better.